just can't stand the sight of you leaving me. Let's just talk this thing over, baby, yeah. Can you see the tears in my eyes? Baby, please don't leave me. Don't leave me. You're the meaning of my life. Without you.
Wow.
Hello, everyone.
Hello,
We are live with the team of Let's Talk It Over. It's been a while, actually. Our last show was in July, so I've missed you all. As you can see, there's a new member of the team, Ece Temelkuran, and I hope I pronounce your surname right, Ece. I know Ece is Ece because you told me, and I'm personally super happy to have you.
Me too.
As part of the team.
Thank you.
And I think you know everyone on the panel a little bit, or more than a little bit, or very well, I think. So
let's not go
so
there.
yes, it's
We are down the pub. We are down the pub, Frank. Just remember that.
we are down the pub. I'm actually drinking water here.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's amazing, Ece, to have that. I'm so happy that you've accepted to be part of the team. And Yanis, Brian, Roger, if you want to say anything.
Yeah,
welcome. Let me just say that Badin was saying that a Greek, a Turk, an Englishman, a Frenchman, and a half Belgian are walking into a pub.
Yeah.
Exactly. I was thinking that we're like a joke now, like. And then the walks into a bar.
What's funny about that, Brian? What's funny about that? I don't
all the jokes start like that.
They all start that way.
You gotta think of the funny. Thank God, Ece is here to explain to me.
Well, the half Belgian on its own is a joke.
Yeah, all right.
Oh,
let's not start talking about Eddie Barat and his bloody spandex trousers and riding bicycles and French fries and all the other things that Belgians are well known for, because we'd be here all bloody day. We would never get to whatever it is that we're going to talk about, would we?
Correct. We're going to talk about.
I don't know.
To give Ece a proper introduction for those who don't know enough about Ece, she's an award-winning Turkish novelist and political commentator. Your work and your journalism has appeared in The Guardian, The New York Times, The New Statesman, and many other publications. You are the author of many books, including the internationally acclaimed How to Lose a Country, that I know Brian has read, at least. And so that's Ece for you all.
I'm about to be thrown out of the bar now.
But I mean, what we're here to talk about tonight is the sort of the global climate crisis, and which is probably the most crucial issue we are facing as human civilization. Really, I don't want to be too dark or anything, but it is. It's human survival is going to depend on what we do about this in the next few years. The COP26 sort of just finished. I know, Brian, you were at the COP26, and it's going to be important, I think, to talk about the good things that happened at the COP26, because we know all the bad things from the so-called political leaders and stuff, but I'm sure that you've had also some amazing experiences with actually activists and things like that. Yanis, I know you told me you refused to go, so it'd be good to hear about this as well. I just wanted to mention actually that in the second part of the show, so in about 30 minutes, we will be joined by Dipti Bhatnagar. She's an activist, climate, global warming from Friends of the Earth, and Aruna Chandrasekhar, who is a journalist and writes for Carbon Brief. So they'll join us in about 25, 30 minutes. But enough of me. Yanis, you actually have picked the title of the show. Why did you sort of want to put the emphasis on big business?
Because they are the vandals. They're the ones who are vandalizing the world. Look, there are three main reasons why we're destroying the planet. One is the standard, kind of free riding. Everybody trying to free ride on everybody else. Let somebody else solve the problem, not us. The second one is a coordination problem, matching resources to needs. But the main reason why we're destroying the planet is a one-word explanation: capitalism. For 200 years now, everything that was good was commodified, including part of the human soul. All the bads that the same production process generated were released into the atmosphere. Because think about it, carbon that was stored for millennia in trees and under the surface was plundered to power the machinery, to power the manufacturing. So immense wealth and a lot of poverty, of course, was produced by this capitalist machine, a process of depleting free natural capital. Because you see, they don't pay for it. The private cost, the cost to businesses of burning coal is tiny compared to the cost to the planet, to humanity as a whole. So effectively, they're getting a free ride for 200 years. And now workers around the world, especially in the developing world, will have to pay the cost to nature that the capitalist class never paid globally. Mark Carney went to Glasgow. Maybe, Brian, you had dinner with him. Mark Carney was the governor of the Bank of England. And actually, I know him. He's a very pleasant chap. But he came there representing global finance. And he said, the money is here. I am representing asset managers worth $130 trillion. $130 trillion. The money is here. Yes, of course it's there if society as a whole is prepared to pay the financiers for their money. Yes, they will be quite happy to supply it. But we need to remember, that's how I conclude, that they shall not cease voluntarily from producing stuff whose production entails releasing CO2 in the air. They will not stop doing this until we take their toys away from them. Their toys, of course, are the means of production. Unless capitalism is put it in its place, which effectively is, in a tiny little box somewhere, I don't think we can save this planet. And they proved this. Biden arrived empty-handed in Glasgow. The European Union has a supposedly a Green Deal, but there's no money in it. And Germany is producing lignite-powered power stations as we speak. So yes, big business has jeopardized one of the last chances we have to save the planet. That's why they love net zero, because net zero gives them a license to burn the remaining stocks of carbon. Capitalism is the problem, folks.
Here.
I wanted to. Oh, sorry, Roger. Go.
Here. He's right, of course. And actually, we can speak till we're blue in the face about climate issues, but it will always come back to the great truth that Yanis has just laid on the table in front of us. So maybe we can come back to that later, because I'm fascinated to hear what Brian has to say about COP26. I wasn't there. I know very little about it except what I've read. And I don't read the news much, so I know so little about it. So can we hear from Brian? I'd really be interested to hear what happened, Brian.
Sure. So I
was actually going to, No, I was going to pass the mic on to you, Brian, before you started to speak, Roger.
Well, hang on a minute. This is the fucking pub, Frank. I'm not going to wait for you to say, "Ooh, can we hear from the old lanky prick in the corner with his pint of mild?" If I want to say something, I bloody well will. All right. Thank you. Go on, Brian. Sorry, mate. Sorry, Frank. Sorry, Ece.
No.
Sorry, Yanis. It's so hard.
It's a pub, you know. Don't have to say sorry.
Yeah, when the woman comes, it's
Frank.
weird.
Hey, Frank, I know that. I know I don't have to say sorry. All right. I am a bloke in a pub. I don't have to say sorry to you or the barman or anybody else or the bloody landlord or exactly.
Or the company that owns a pub. Come on, Brian.
Exactly. You know, exactly. Or the brewery, you know.
I'm sorry, I'm too polite to interrupt. So unless somebody stops talking, you'll never hear a word from me. So I was there for the second week of COP, not the first one. So the first week was when most of the official stuff happened, but there was still a lot of it remaining, the residue of it when I got there. And what I came away thinking was some of the most amazing people on earth have gathered here to talk to each other. And mostly they aren't talking to each other very much. So the activists were all talking to the activists, and the official delegations were all talking to the official delegations. And there was very little crossover between them, which was quite disappointing. And there was something else as well. I really started to doubt whether anybody was very serious about the whole thing, because the quality of some of the arguments was so tragically bad. And I was trying to think of an analogy. So let's say we're in a boat and it's starting to sink, and somebody starts bailing out the water with a bucket. Great, he's got a bucket. And then somebody else in the boat says, "Oh, but it's a plastic bucket. Plastic isn't sustainable." It was just ridiculous. Some of the arguments were so stupid. And I feel that way about a lot of the environmental arguments, that we just don't have the sense of scale right. You know, okay, in an ideal world, we would use a nicely made zinc bucket, or wooden, perhaps even better. But the fucking only thing we've got is a plastic bucket, and the boat is sinking. So are we going to listen to some PC cunt who says, "Oh, it's a plastic bucket"? And it was the same about people talking about each other. You know, there were people there who obviously had a great deal of knowledge and some clever ideas and some good convictions, but people were kind of cancelling each other because that person was a Tory. So it doesn't matter what his ideas are, we can't talk to them. There was a very brilliant report prepared called the National Food Plan. But it was headed up by a guy called Henry Dimbleby, who, of course, being a Dimbleby, was seen as part of the English establishment. So none of the activists would take it seriously. But actually, it's a really good report. So what I kept thinking was, wouldn't it have been great if everybody at this bloody place had to read Ece's last book together? Because really, we have to make this realization that we're going to have to compromise. We're going to have to work with people we don't agree with very much sometimes, that we don't even like. We're going to have to use technologies that we might be a little bit icky about, you know. But we can't afford to be so selective about everything and to be so absolutely right on about everything before we move. We've got to be moving now, really. So that was the disappointing part, that I felt there was a completely unbridged gulf between the insiders, the official invitees, and the outsiders, the activists. And this manifested in lots of ways. For instance, you know how difficult it is to get somebody from, say, Sri Lanka or Tasmania to Glasgow, the hotel rooms, the bookings of the flights, all of that kind of thing. Finally, they're there and they're talking, but the mic doesn't work. And nobody's fixing the mic. This is just insane, you know, that there seemed to be such an absence on the activist part about actually communicating. It was as though people thought, I'm so obviously right that I don't actually need a microphone. You know, people will just get it because I'm right. And there was a sort of arrogance in both the activist position and the official positions, actually, which we really need to lose, a bit more humility. So there were lots of good things. There were lots of things that seemed to promise that if we address this climate problem, we will not only deal with that, but we will come up with a better world altogether, because we'll be dealing with a lot of issues about inequality and about people's rights and so on that need to be dealt with. But okay, that's it from me.
Well, Brian doesn't. We were supposed to be on stage with Brian in Barcelona very soon, and it was cancelled due to COVID situation. So we had a chat about COP, and now he's not saying it out of his, humbleness and kindness, but actually he fixed the microphone, as far as I know, during that meeting. And then he called this Roddies, and then he organized a Roddy sort of mobilization to help the activists. These are practical things, but I'm afraid you're right. It comes from the arrogance that, we are right. We are telling the truth. We are, we are referring to the facts. So everybody should be convinced. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, we're living in a world where facts do not convince people. And I think, this emotional part of the story, politics of emotions part of the story, should be really handled properly by the progressives, by the climate activists, because not everybody respond to fear and apocalyptic narrative as we want them to respond. Yeah. It's like they hide, they reject, they go in denial and so on. So we have to find a way to manage these mass emotions as well. So yeah, practical side of it is this is a very practical thing. We have to manage the emotions so that they can go out, and plastic or tin or wood, whatever, they start saving the boat. But I think there's also, we talked about this with Brian earlier, but lack of friendliness as well, I guess, not only towards the big powers, which I'm not expecting, but among the progressives, among the activists, so to speak. So this is another politics of emotion problem. I guess we will have to deal with, because we have to enlarge the front. We cannot do this on our own. It's a massive problem. So we need everyone, actually, unfortunately. Yeah. But the part of the story, what I see is the young people, they're removing their consent. I don't know what you think, Yanis. You are more, active. You're talking more with, young people, but they're removing their consent from capitalism. The concepts of power, rich, and, all these things that were, worshipped in 1980s is no more cute or appreciated. I feel that happening not only among the politicized young people, but also outside that politicization. There is this removal of consent from capitalism. So I am expecting some generational crisis very soon, like in a few years, actually, especially in Europe. So I don't know. Yeah.
The evidence doesn't support that, does it? What we're seeing happening in countries that purport to be democratic, where people are going to the vote, is, for instance, in Chile at the moment, there's the second round of the presidential election is coming up in 7 days, 6 days, 5 days time. And all accounts, I'm not sure, I'm finding it very difficult to get any cogent information out of Chile at the moment. I don't know what the polls are saying, but the first round was run by a man called Cast, who's an out and out downright Nazi. And he just is. His great hero is Adolf Hitler. this is the guy. And he's in a position to win a presidential election in Chile. So where are the young people who are saying no to capitalism? Or do people not equate capitalism with fascism? If you see what
they don't. Oh, of course they don't.
Well, then, okay. So then we come. This is interesting because you were saying that they're rejecting capitalism, but what they're not making a connection between capitalism and fascism. The two are inextricably linked, in my view. That's only in my view. All right, I'll butt out again, but I think it's interesting because when you were talking and listening to Brian talking as well, and when Brian talking about COP26, two things occurred in my brain. One, I want to know what the food plan is because I wasn't there and I didn't hear it, but it sounds fascinating. And if Brian thinks it's important, it bloody well is important. All right, that's kind of one thing. And the other thing is that constantly in my head, it goes, nothing has any teeth. All right. It's quite clear in the world that we live in that we, the people of the world, don't give a fuck about human rights or the law. It's happening all around us. You know, I was making speeches on 2nd Avenue at lunchtime yesterday about Julian Assange. Nobody gives a shit that this is completely illegal, against everything that we pretend to believe in when we talk about democracy, freedom, and the law. So it's fascinating to hear you talk about young people. It'd be fascinating to see whether a generation might be persuaded to demand recourse to the law for themselves, if not for all the poor people in the world who have never had recourse to the law. And although in 1789 or whenever, you know, the French started telling us that their revolution was actually about granting recourse to the law, to the sans-culotte, it hasn't happened. There is still no recourse to any law because the capitalists that Yanis talks about and the people who represent them in the governments of the Western nations, right, don't care about the people. They care about the capitalists. That is who they represent. All of them, you know, across the board. It's a very, the Overton window, I know that's about discussion normally, but the window of government is very, very narrow. You're only actually allowed to represent the rich and the poor. I'll shut up again. But Brian, thank you for all of that.
Just
very
illuminating
to me.
A quick intervention, Roger. Let's not talk about Ece. Let's not talk about the young as if they are a homogeneous lot.
Yeah, good.
They are young socialists and increasing numbers of them. There are young fascists. Let's not forget. Let's not,
huge numbers.
Young fascists, and there are young who worry about climate change, but have been schooled to think of capitalism like fish think of the water. That is, they don't see it. They are swimming in it, and they take it as a given. What we need to do is we need to explain, firstly, the association between fascism and capitalism.
Exactly.
Fascism is what rears its ugly head when capitalism has a crisis and there's any chance of a progressive left-wing revolt against it. This is what happened in the 1920s and 30s. This is what happened in Greece in 2011. They need to understand that fascism is like a cancer growth that grows on capitalism when liberal democracy produces any chance that capitalist interests will be jeopardized by progressives. Exactly. And when it comes to climate change, we have to clear their minds of the bullshit about net zero. They have to understand that when the governments tell them, we are going to reach net zero in 2030, 40, 50, this is crap. What they are telling them essentially is this: we are going to keep pumping the shit out of the air. We know what the damage is. This is tangible. It's certain. And at the same time, we're going to do some offsets. We'll go to Ecuador and buy some forests and plant a few more genetically modified trees. So you have no idea how long these forests would last for, what kind of offsets they will actually create. It's a bit like Philip Morris trying to stop the end of smoking in pubs, since we are in a pub, by insisting on ventilation rather than on a ban on smoking. That's what net zero is. It's in the interest of capitalists. They will use fascists to kill those who try to close down their mines. Even the financial mechanism by which net zero is achieved is crap. Because think about it. Look at Rio Tinto in Australia, right? It wasn't good for their image to have some coal mines, so they gave them up. They divested. Sounds good. No, it's not, because then even worse operators took over and continued to extract coal and burn it, even under worse conditions than Rio Tinto. So it's not just, let's not look just at particular companies. The whole thing, it's a totality of evil that needs to be addressed. And the young must understand that they can't be fashionable in their struggle. They have to do unfashionable things. They have to become a pain in the ass if they're going to win anything.
But they also have to understand, if I may say, you cannot cherry pick human rights. You can't have human rights for yourself, but deny them to other people.
That's right.
And the fundamental platform that is enshrined in 1789 and in 1948 is that is our postcard to the future, is the idea, not the idea, the implementation of the idea of equal human rights for all our brothers and sisters all over the world, irrespective of their race, creed, color, nationality, blah, 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 blah. That is our passport to tomorrow. But it has to be implemented by international humanitarian law. Nothing is implemented by the law. The international courts of justice have no power over the veto in the permanent members of the Security Council of the United Nations, i.e. the United States, Great Britain, France, China, and Russia. The five of them, say yes, or mainly the United States now, because it's so much more powerful than everybody else, just says, we're not interested in the law. You do what we say or we'll kill you. And this is the world that we live in. And they're killing us. And they're doing it by burning coal, as you said, right? Or now biomass, burning fucking trees, even worse.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's right.
I'm not sorry. I'm in the pub. Excuse me. Look, hey, Brian, I'm not drinking out of a plastic mug, so we're all right, mate.
No, it's young. I'm like, obviously they're not homogeneous, and I'm not thinking that suddenly they're all becoming socialists and so on. But none of us is young here, by the way. So we are speaking on behalf of them, which is quite dangerous, especially with this generation. But they are removing their consent from capitalism because of a factual situation, because they cannot have anything anymore. They are the generation that won't have, properties, that won't have proper salaries. And they're already mourning for the things that will be lost on the planet. They're already in mourning for the planet. So they are removing that consent on a massive scale. It depends on us, actually, where that consent will go. The problem is they cannot connect with capitalism with fascism, because they heard these stories of, totalitarianism can only come from communist states. They read 1980-40, thinking that this could only happen, in Soviet Union and so on. And fascism can only appear in boots and hockey jackets and so on. So they cannot understand that, behind these entertaining form of right-wing populism, there is actually fascism, and fascism is innate in capitalism. So it is our job, I think, to explain that and to make the connection between climate change and climate crisis and capitalism. So it's a hard job, because we have this, massive propaganda machine still working properly, and now taking the support from right-wing, the leaders that we call right-wing populists.
How could they not have noticed, Ece, that we're living in the fucking Weimar Republic, that was not a left-wing regime that suddenly started the Second World War and almost destroyed the planet, single-handedly. It's right before their eyes. It's quite clear. The model is there for all young people to see.
Well,
how can they possibly be believing that the only tyrannies are the USSR and China and anything that might not follow the neoliberal capitalist model? It seems bizarre, and yet I believe you.
I would say too much distraction. I'm like, the other week in London, for instance, everybody was talking about Christmas party, Boris Johnson's Christmas party, whereas the problem was the law passing from the parliament. So too much distraction.
Yeah,
manipulation.
Okay. Yeah, you're right. Of course, it's distraction. And
one of the interesting.
Sorry, go on, Brian.
Sorry, one of the things that was encouraging about COP was that there were at least 40,000, mostly young people there, because it was a huge number who turned up, who weren't part of the official thing, who don't swallow the story at all. So those are people who are fairly clear about where the problem originates from, and the word capitalism came up a lot. So my problem wasn't with their understanding of how the situation had come into being. I think people pretty much agreed about that. What they didn't agree about, as always with the left, was how we cooperate in doing anything about it. It was the absence of any willingness to compromise that seemed to me the death of our movement, really. People.
Because this is a plug for the Progressive International. This is a plug for the Progressive International.
Yes.
Because this is it's the only show in town.
Mm-hmm.
Join the Progressive International, folks.
I want to hear what Yanis is saying, because I don't understand what he's saying. What are you saying?
We, some years ago, Bernie Sanders and I inaugurated something we call the Progressive International. Now the Progressive International has 200 million members, and we're doing things internationally. We start small. But
we've never heard of you. I've never heard of you.
You haven't, but we had on Black Friday, Roger, you'll be pleased to hear that, we staged an international rolling strike, which began in Vietnam, went to Cambodia, from there to Bangladesh, from Bangladesh to India, from India to Germany and to Sweden, from there to New Jersey, and from there to Seattle, Washington State, targeting Amazon warehouses. And the hashtag was Make Amazon Pay. That was the first global rolling strike that we started. We have a large number of organizations that are part of this, Extinction Rebellion part of this. It is an attempt to do that which bankers and fascists know how to do: unite transnationally.
Well, thank you for explaining that. I'm so glad to hear it. And by the way, you did get to me. I did see Make Amazon Pay. It was in front of me at some point.
There you are.
Whatever. So congratulations on that.
And then Yanis, obviously we're not doing a great job if Roger doesn't know about Progressive International.
No, it doesn't matter, because he knows Make Amazon Pay. He knows the campaign. The campaign is what matters. Our mug faces are not important. What matters is the speakers that are coordinated.
I think you're so wrong about that, because, I know about VM Ecosipende because I've followed, I've read your writings, and I've followed what you do, and Brian as well, and blah, 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 who's involved in that particular initiative. But listening about COP is like, these 40,000 young people need to find leaders.
Yeah.
And if they need to find young leaders, for God's sake, find one or two or a committee or something, because Greta Thunberg, bless her, ain't it. It's too easy to sideline the Greenpeace line. And with all respect to Greenpeace, I don't mean to, but you hear what I'm saying? It's no good just bleating on about climate change. What you're telling me about a rolling strike against Amazon.com, now that is exciting. And that is something, I'm fucking old. I would go. I'll come the next time there is one. I'll turn up on the side of the street and, You know, I will be boots on the ground, just like I was with the 100 people on 2nd Avenue yesterday.
I'm taking note of this, right? I mean,
yeah,
you're
yeah,
on.
do, brother. I'm serious. I'm serious.
Friends,
I'm really happy
I'm sorry
to have learned it. It was worth coming
sorry
down
to interrupt
tonight. What?
But we are talking about the youth. We're talking about leaders. Dipti Bhatnagar, she's now in the waiting room. Johan, can you let Dipti in? Hey, Dipti is joining us from Mozambique.
Welcome, Dipti.
Welcome, Dipti.
This has been fascinating. I've been listening.
Yeah. What are you having? Barman?
So, Dipti, just a brief introduction. Dipti, you are the International Program Coordinator for Climate Justice and Energy at Friends of the Earth Mozambique. You also work on climate justice and dirty energy. That's right?
Yes. I work with Friends of the Earth International and Justiça Ambiental, which is Friends of the Earth here in Mozambique. I'm in Maputo right now.
I'm really happy you actually listened to the first part of the show, because as you heard, a lot of old people have spoken about the young people quite a bit.
It's a joke.
I just want to...
It's a joke. It's one of Frank's jokes.
He's only saying this because he doesn't know how old I am. I could be in the old camp too.
No, you're not.
No.
No, you're not.
Dipti, I just want to ask...
The world. Sorry,
I want to ask you something, actually. We've been talking about the youth, and we've been talking about, Ece, you've mentioned facts, that, facts don't really matter anymore and stuff. I was wondering what you think about this, Dipti, because my thinking is that maybe the facts are so overwhelming and so, we're talking about the end of human civilization, right? It's that the mountain is it's too big to climb. So people rather just continue their daily life and forget about it. Because when COP26 was all about keeping the world under 1.5 degrees Celsius. The UN issued a report right after COP26 saying that under wait, I've got the right stuff here. So under today's emission pledges, we are set for a 2.7 rise. A 2.7 rise really would mean nightmare on Earth. That's as simple as that. More tornadoes, more floods, more, the massive fires we've seen in Australia will happen sort of every year. So don't you think there's a part of it that is so overwhelming and in a way scary that people would rather just forget about it? I don't know what you think about that, Dipti.
I think you're right, Frank. That is definitely what is happening. And it's robbing people's agency, right? Because they're being told this story about climate catastrophe without figuring out, okay, what is their entry point into it? I won't lie, the climate crisis is real. It's very, very serious, but it isn't the only crisis in town, right? There are people who are facing multiple interrelated crises, and that's important to understand as well. So here in Mozambique, 70% of people do not have access to electricity. We're facing an inequality crisis, which you all have been talking about. The richest 5% of people on the planet have emitted 37% of carbon emissions from 1990 to 2015. So what it means is we need to be looking at not just the climate crisis, but also all the other crises, right? And we need to be taking the lead, not just from young people, but from frontline communities. So definitely young people are very much needing to be in this conversation, because this planet is going to be left to them to do what with, leave behind a burning planet. But it's not just about the future, it's also about the past. This is about 500 years of colonialism and slavery, which is what this current moment has brought us to. It's all of that history, genocide, that has brought us to this current moment. And if we ignore that history, we're not going to be able to find solutions for the future. And that's what you've been talking about, right? The young people need to understand that what is it about the capitalist system, the extractivist system that has brought us to this point, and hence the solutions that we need to create for the future need to be very, very different. And going back to your question, Frank, really, this is about people power, and our work is on movement building and so that people feel like they have that agency. They can resist that coal mine that comes to their community. They can resist the net zero project. I'm so happy to hear Yanis talk about the net zero is going to be another scheme just to allow polluters to continue polluting. That is exactly what it's for. And this is a problem. And we need to be able to be able to give people agency to say, you can actually fight this, and you have a voice to be able to fight this, even if your community is on the front lines and completely affected and devastated by what's going on by climate change. But there's a way ahead, and we need to build the way ahead. And it's absolutely crucial because there are people's lives at stake, not just in the future, but today. That's what wakes me up every morning, to be like, okay, we got to do our work. We got to do what we can. We have to do what we can because justice is important.
Here.
Yeah.
Dipti, is there...
Can I say some? Yeah. No, sorry. Go, Ece. Go.
No, I was just watching Euronews, and there is a current issue about Mozambique, and with a case, I think, about them, So you were actually very right when you brought colonialism into this, because it is still connected to some sort of new form of colonialism. So would you like to expand on that? Sorry, Yanis, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Absolutely. So the largest gas field found anywhere in the last 10 years has been found offshore northern Mozambique, off the province of Cabo Delgado, just under Tanzania. And ever since that's happened, there's been a huge gas rush. So many countries, the export credit agencies, the companies, ExxonMobil, Eni, etc., are involved here. Sasol, also from our neighbor, our sort of colonial neighbor, South Africa. So what is happening is that Friends of the Earth in the UK, Friends of the Earth in England, Wales, and Northern Ireland have taken their government to court. The United Kingdom Export Finance, which has agreed to give $1 billion to the Mozambique Gas project, has been taken to court by Friends of the Earth in the UK to say, why are you doing this? Because this is not consistent with climate goals, but also it's causing devastation on the ground. I think the important thing is that, we oppose dirty energy projects on the ground. Our communities, our allies are opposing extractivist projects all over the world, not just because it causes climate change, but because it devastates the local ecology, it devastates people's lives and livelihoods. So what is happening here in Mozambique is that this gas rush that has been provoked is causing a huge amount of conflict and insurgency. It's really horrible what has been happening in the north of Mozambique. It's really heartbreaking. And at the same time, it's, people's lives and livelihoods are being taken away. And this is what is happening all over the world, where dirty energy projects are being, are being laid out all over the place. So we hope that, there was a court case from the 7th to the 9th of December in London, which was about stopping this finance for Mozambique Gas, because of course, our country needs energy. I just finished saying that 70% of our people do not have access to electricity. But the gas is not going to be the way they have it. The gas is the same old colonial project, to use your word. It's taking the gas from the source or offshore and taking it away from this continent, right? The whole old colonial model. So we want a different future for our people. We want renewable energy. We want renewable energy that is in the hands of people. Socially owned renewable energy systems. We want a conversation about energy consumption in the north and also the southern elites. These are the things that we need to be talking about. We need that transformation of the energy system, and we need wider system change. That's what we're calling for as Friends of the Earth International. And we need to be thinking about the principles of that energy system that we want to see, so that it's not just about, okay, let's remove coal and put a solar farm. There are communities in India, where I was born, that are fighting against large-scale solar farms. Because why? It's taking away their lives, their lands, their livelihoods, and it's being treated as just another, it's just like a coal mine. For their purposes, it's just like a coal mine, because it's affecting their livelihoods and because they're not included in the benefits of that project. So we need to be re-envisioning our energy system in a very, very different way. That's a little bit of the work that we're trying to do, but there's so much more still to be done.
Mm-hmm.
Can I say something? I just want to. We have about 20 minutes left, and I think it's important to emphasize the potential solutions, right, or the way forward. I read a report that says that researchers, they discovered that a critical sort of threshold was passed when the size of a committed minority reached roughly 25% of the population. Apparently, at this point, social conventions suddenly flip. So how do we actually manage to build a movement that is already quite big, but make it into sort of 25% apparently of the sort of the worldwide, I guess, population? Is it education? Is it, because I think, again, like telling people you need to act on global warming because I look at this massive fire scares people. It's like when you say people you need to go to be against war because look, kids are getting their heads cut off. It actually puts, sort of puts people away. So Brian, you want to say something?
Yes, thank you. I think one way that we can start to engage people is by stopping being so bloody snobbish about this whole thing. So one of the things that has happened in the last couple of years is lots and lots of books have come out with titles like 39 Ways to Save the Planet or The $1 Trillion Dream, or all sorts of ideas about how we could address this problem. And they are almost universally disliked by left-wing intellectuals because they don't deal with structural problems. Okay, well, I agree, we do have to deal with structural problems, but that doesn't mean that in the meantime, we stop overlooking technical solutions. There's such a hatred of technology among intellectuals, this feeling of, oh, that's just technology, that doesn't solve the problem at all. But actually, there are technical solutions as well. And for me, nuclear power is one of them. The total snobbery about nuclear power is ridiculous, I think. That's another argument. Perhaps one night down the pub, we can talk about that. That would be.
But I'd like to talk about it now because I would die if I don't.
Sorry, I shouldn't have mentioned it because now the rest of
you
should.
It won't be taken up.
We are at the pub. We mention anything that pops into our head.
Okay.
Look, I'll be quick. Look, I agree with you. Technology is important. It's crucial. We need to love technology, but there are technologies that are technologies. So I'll take something Dipti said. Dipti, you alluded to, and I'm very glad you did, to the importance of technologies that are decentralized and which are they have a propensity towards being communally owned. Ownership is everything. I'll stick to my guns. Everything's about capitalism, ending the private ownership by the 1% of the 1% of everything. When we moved from coal to oil, we moved to a technology that was anti-trades union because it involved a lot of fewer people. If you look at a nuclear power station, forget about the fact that it's not renewable and that you've got waste and you have the danger and the risk. A nuclear power station is top-down. By definition, it's a huge investment. It requires lots of security guards, which means a security state, right? And it is the opposite of what the societies, the communities in Mozambique, in Greece, in Scotland need, which is technology, high-tech, small turbines, solar panels that can be owned by the community and managed by the community and create good quality green jobs in the community, unlike the nuclear power station. Tony Benn, one of my great heroes, he was very pro-nuclear, Brian, in the 1960s. And then he became the minister responsible for nuclear power. And he turned completely against it. Why? Two reasons. One is, I remember him talking about this back then. One reason is that it creates the security state. If you have a nuclear power station that has a capacity to, to also produce nuclear weapons or, enrich uranium and so on, it is a wet dream for those who want a state that is oppressive. And the second reason is just too long-term and too inflexible, and the fixed costs are so great that it is impossible to be owned communally. So yes, we need technologies, but we need to move to an ownership model which is community-based and not either based, owned by the Soviet Union, Gosplan, the big state, or by big business.
I'm not going to respond because I want to invite Aruna to say something, since she's just appeared.
Yeah, I want to.
Nice to see you, Aruna.
Thanks, Brian. I want you to.
Oh, somebody's unmuted.
Welcome, Aruna.
So we've got.
Thank you so
we've got
much.
Aruna.
Welcome, Aruna.
Chandrasekhar.
Nice to you all.
Go.
Nice to join in the discussion.
Aruna, a brief intro. So you cover land, food systems, and nature at Carbon Brief.
Yes.
We are talking now about sort of the solutions, the way forward. You reported on COP26, and
Yes.
you can talk to us in a way about the outcomes of COP26. And I guess there are a lot of ongoing negotiations, right? So as part of the outcome of COP26, do you see potential solutions?
I think I'm looking at outcomes, and it's been a long series of negotiations. We've been discussing many of these points for a long time. For instance, some of the negotiations, like this is the time where it took nearly 4 years of negotiations to close the rules on Article 6, which is essentially around carbon markets, around offsetting. And it's been one of those issues which has been so hotly debated by states. Now, the fact that, many states actually did cross their red lines and come to certain agreements around it. Now, some of these things are also, they do present future loopholes, but at the same time, some of them have been ruled out. For instance, there's been a strong emphasis on not allowing for double counting, where a country that, uses or counts these credits, the home as well as the host country you can't count this as an emissions reduction on both sides. So there have been certain things which have been hotly contested. There were lots of, the first week of COP was really very much about celebrities, and was very much about leaders making huge speeches and announcements. So there was that much of the flurry of a big deforestation pledge to end deforestation by 2030. How do you get around to it, and how are those solutions? How do you there was also a huge emphasis on nature-based solutions, when it's not really clear what those are. It's a very and studies as well as experts say that it's a vague catch-all term. Others say that nature can actually account for a large degree of emissions reductions. Others instead say that we shouldn't be asking nature to mop up a man-made mess. So there was a huge emphasis on that, and eventually it was removed from the text because the idea of nature being something that doesn't have its own inherent value and largely be left to solve humanity's problems. That was something that a lot of countries, like for instance, developing countries such as Bolivia, also called out on. So, at COP, there was, the Glasgow Climate Pact did, and it is unprecedented in certain ways, where at the same time, there's been a pledge from developed countries to at least double their finance, but at the same time, there hasn't been finance coming through. The 100 billion goal has not been met. And it was something that really breaks trust. And developing country parties have called this out, saying that how do you trust what's going forward and for the decade to come, where it matters the most, where there is clearly been no attempt to meet those finance pledges at all. But then there were also strong calls to talk about what happens now. What does long-term finance look like? So where are we going to be talking about? For instance, again, Dipti's been talking about climate impacts. When you get hit by disasters year after year, I'm from India. And again, looking at places that have been devastated year on year. So those sort of claims and how to, so not being able to see that on the table was something that, again, is something it's noted with deep regret in the text that of the Glasgow Climate Pact that it hasn't been, and they've been urged to fully deliver this through 2025. So yeah, those are things that have become the sticking point. And a lot of indigenous groups also argued that, for instance, human rights and free, prior, informed consent of indigenous communities hasn't been included in these discussions around carbon markets, when essentially, if you're going to do these sort of offsetting projects, that they are at greatest risk. And that's something that also was pushed through, while they managed to get an independent grievance mechanism and really had to push for that towards the end. That at the same time, human rights is not explicitly mentioned in how these activities will be set up. So there's a lot of spaces which, you have to, things which were professed as solutions and as outcomes will, of course, have to be further negotiated. But also the fact that we're running out of time, and over 40 countries hadn't yet updated their pledges, some of them who are really major emitters. So yeah, as much as we see, as much as some of the stuff, it was surprising that negotiations managed to end and to get the sort of text, it is still, there's a lot of loopholes yet to be fixed.
It's all irrelevant. It's rearranging deck chairs to the bloody Titanic. Carbon markets are a scourge. We should move away from the idea that they might be a solution. They are the problem. They need to end today. Carbon markets must be banned. The fact that they are even failing to agree amongst themselves on how to have them. If extraterrestrials were watching, they would have said, "Oh, come on, guys, just die. You are a virus that needs to be eradicated from that planet." And carbon markets and net zero is making a virtue out of the problem for propaganda purposes, in order to continue to pollute, in order to continue to extract, in order to continue to destroy people's lives.
What do you offer as an alternative to carbon markets?
Carbon tax. A carbon tax, a huge carbon tax, which is not collected by the state, but which is used to redistribute. So if you have one potato or one tomato that is produced using, diesel in order to heat up the greenhouse, and one that is produced sustainably, the first one should cost 100 times more than the second one. So it reduces a large tax. But that tax must be collected and be redistributed to the poorer of the earth, so that those who pollute and the rich pay for the transition and pay in order to have a massive price differential between the things that do harm and the things that don't do harm.
But what is the difference between that and the carbon tax?
The difference?
What's the difference between that and a carbon market?
It's a huge difference, gigantic difference. Could not be greater, Brian. You're just giving me an opportunity to answer, but thank you. In a market, what you're saying is you're going to Rio Tinto and you're saying to them, we give you the right to produce into the atmosphere so many million tons of CO2, right? Mm-hmm. But no more. And if you save some of that, you can sell the right to pollute to that extent to somebody else, and you create a market. So effectively, you legitimize pollution. And you pretend that the market mechanism will create a price that you leave it to the market to determine, that will coordinate our activities as human beings. It won't. We need to specify today that tomorrow morning, anybody who pollutes the air with, a ton of CO2 will have to pay $50. And we need to say that next year is going to be $100. In 3 years' time, it will be $300. We must fix this price so that everybody knows what the price is. Don't leave it to a market. And to make it clear that it is a bad. Because when you create a market, you are turning bads into goods to the extent that people can profit from buying and selling them. It is a philosophical difference. It's a practical difference. And effectively, carbon markets are a license to pollute.
But if you I agree with you, by the way. I am slightly saying this so that you'll explain the position. But if you make a carbon tax, aren't you just saying that rich people can buy things that are made with a lot of carbon, but poor people can't? Effectively, you still haven't got rid of the problem in a certain sense.
That is correct. That is correct. So what
and
you
who
need
gets to impose the tax?
What
And
you also
who
need
gets
is
to-
quotas. You need quotas as well as a carbon tax. So you need to set limits to physical growth. You have to say that you are not going to produce more than a certain number of tons of cement. So, but a combination of quotas and tariffs, of quotas and taxes, but no market.
I think
remember that this is money that accumulates to go to the poor, right?
What's Ece want to say?
No, Aruna was saying
Yeah,
something.
no, I was just, the question is who sets the tax, and how do you get everybody to agree to it? And that is which governments? Because again, many commodities, of course, now for instance, like the EU has a carbon tax, and that was something that developing countries were also like, at the same time, that was a bit of a sticking position where you're like, okay, well, goods from these different countries, if we are going to have to pay tariffs for it, and then you also want us to set ambitious emission reduction targets.
I'm sorry, but Europe does not have a carbon tax. It's got an ETS.
A
trading scheme, not the same thing.
Yeah, no,
it's got one of those stupid, horrible carbon markets, which is partial, only for four industries. It's not general. But I take your point about global governance. You need a global governance of the scheme. Okay, so in the same way that you have, they have no problem having the WTO. When it comes to giving rights to multinationals, but they have a problem suddenly coordinating a global carbon tax. And if the carbon tax is redistributive, as I'm suggesting, you can have a redistribution process from the global north to the global south. So you can have an agreement that the south is going to impose the tax too, but it will be a net beneficiary if the money that accumulates from the global carbon tax in the global north, which is going to be a lot more than in the south, is then redistributed. So what I'm calling for is a global carbon tax, which is redistributed within countries, but also across countries. So in the end, a poor country, in Mozambique, for instance, you'll be net beneficiaries. There will be a tax for, locally produced stuff that is bad for the environment, but Mozambique will collect more from the rest of the world from the global carbon tax than it will give out.
But I think we need to be talking about turning off the fossil tap first and foremost.
Yeah.
We need to stop emissions at source, right? Not compensate them somewhere else.
Absolutely.
So that and those who create the crisis need to do it first. So the global north needs to turn off the tap first, but they're not doing it. Some of the biggest fossil fuel developments coming up are happening in the global north. It's absolutely ridiculous. So we need to be talking about turning off the fossil tap, but also it's not the only thing, right? We need to be guaranteeing land rights and forest rights for communities in the global south, because their lands and forests are at stake right now with the whole net zero and carbon markets. These big corporations are coming for their resources. So we need to shut off the fossil tap. We need to ensure land rights for people. We need to talk about valuing of care work. I mean, this is such a big change that we're talking about. It's not just the energy conversation. We're really needing to talk about this bigger picture of system change.
It's peace as well, Dipti. It's peace as well. Ece and I come from two countries. Ece and I come from two countries that are very close to war every summer. We're close to war every summer. Okay, and our stupid governments, the stupid Greek government, the stupid Turkish government, right, are fighting over the right to extract oil and gas from the Eastern Mediterranean. Okay, so we're going to go to war, killing people, each other, destroying our already suffering economies, to extract things that will destroy the planet, things that we neither need nor want. Now, how stupid is that?
I mean, the base of
Yanis, you are laying out this amazing, system, but it all depends on political power, because the system you are talking about requires a power that distributes the riches somehow justly and so on. And there is this urgency situation as well, emergency situation. Both Aruna and Dipti and every one of us actually talked about it. Like, we have to do something now. What is to be done now? And everybody responds to it in a different way. This urgency, makes people afraid, but some people are activated and so on. So I was actually wondering how Dipti and Aruna, up to a certain degree, would think about that. What now? What's to do now? What can people do now? And how do you think you can convince people that they have to do something and they can do something about this?
And I think before you go, Aruna or Dipti, we're going to have to end the show. So I think it's a great way to end the show, to sort of let you two speak about potential solutions. Because obviously there's a lot we haven't spoken about. Debt, for example, the fact that lower income countries spend 5 more times on debt than coping with the impact of climate change. That's, we didn't speak really about a potential wealth tax as well. So, we could have like 5 shows about all this, but it'd be great to hear you too. I don't know who wants to, you want to start? Maybe Aruna and Dipti, you,
So I just wanted to, at least on what COPs and what happened there, was the fact that a lot of developing countries, and especially least developed countries, spoke about the fact that most aid or most climate finance, most climate finance, there isn't a definition of what that is. Right? And wealthy countries have resisted defining what that is. And the fact that most of this comes as not as grants, but as loans. And when economies are already devastated by COVID, when they're devastated by multiple extreme weather events, that this should not be coming as loans, but as grants. And that continues to, the evading of what that should be. Before we even talk about a carbon tax globally coming on, like, there are these tracks of negotiations, has been argued for a long time. But in terms of what comes in terms of grants for states that are battling the worst outcomes, I think that's something that is and will be on the table. And then at least one of the other things is of how can you increase ambition before 2030. So I think that seems to be, and to still have the space to be able to do it, not to be like, okay, we will revisit this later, we will visit this in a and pledge higher later, but to revisit this year on year and be like, okay, this is not a once in a 5-year plan, and we have in the decade that matters the most. So I think one of the good things that maybe came out of COP was the fact that, leaders did feel the pressure. There may have been blah, 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 but by the numbers of pledges, by the numbers of other things, it feels like that they were feeling the heat. And I think that comes from people and that comes from their constituencies. So I think that especially on the question of finance, that's what we need. And especially states that are really battling with this, that are going to seek a much stronger definition to have faith in the process at all.
I think for me as well, it really is about people power. It's about movement building. It's about meeting people where they are right now. How can we're going to need a lot of people for this movement. And how can we bring people in where they are? What are the issues that they care about? What is it that makes them think about their lives and their struggles? And we need to think about solidarity. This is really about connecting struggles. And solidarity means my struggle is your struggle is my struggle. And it's an absolutely important piece of our work, because that's how we connect humanity, right? It's not going to, system change is not going to be easy. And it's not just about the energy system or the economic system. It is about all of that. It's also about changing our value system. It's about leaving behind this world of greed and profit and competition. And how can we produce a world of cooperation and, that humanity. That's what we need to do. There's big scale change that we need to make. This is about democracy and governance structures. In so many of our countries, our democracies are captured, and that's the start. That's why people feel like they don't have a voice, because they go make their vote, and then what happens to it? What are the systems of governance showing us? So there are those big changes that we need to make. But so we need this big scale, and at the same time, we need the individual one-on-one scale to make every person feel like your voice is important, and you come join us in the struggle, and we'll be in solidarity together. Bit by bit, we've got to create that movement. It's going to take a lot. It's going to take time. It's urgent. And at the same time, it needs to go slow. It needs to go at everybody's pace. So somehow we've got to go together, go fast. We've got to go slow, bring everyone in. We've got to be at this big scale, and we've got to be at this small scale. We just got to keep doing it. It's, center people at the front line, center solidarity, center justice, and let's just do it. Let's do it bit by bit.
Here, Dipti.
Here.
No more to be said. Nothing more to be added.
Goodbye from the club. Well done, Dipti.
Yeah. So nothing more to be added. Oops. There you go. Roger's disappeared. He got too emotional after your speech, Dipti. That's the way he is. But thanks a lot to everyone. Aruna, Dipti, I know it was very short, but I thought you were both excellent, and it gives us a way to think forward. And so thank you, Aruna. Thank you, Ece, for your
Thanks
first.
so much.
Let's talk it over. Thanks, Dipti. Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Yanis.
No, don't
to everyone
thank us.
who's been watching.
But Frank, you cannot thank us. You cannot thank us. We are at the pub together. Okay?
Yeah, you're right.
Not allowed to
in the
thank us.
pub. Yeah.
We are.
Sorry.
It was amazing meeting you. You refreshed me. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's a lot, really.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. It's been great to be on.
And so to everyone who's watched, feel free to like Let's Talk It Over or subscribe to the channel. We'll be back on soon, early 2022, I think. And
if we survive the holidays, yes.
If we survive, yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
See you.
Bye-bye.
See you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks.
La soledad del pajonal al corazón se iguala. Desde aquel día en que mi longuita se fue huyendo, ¿para dónde marcharía esta longuita cuando volverá? Han pasado ya 6 cosechas.